Hi, it's Nick on the 14th of November with the second episode of this week's theme of the power of following your calling. And I think one of the distinctions I made a while ago and other people seem to find it helpful to make as well is the difference between motivation and inspiration, because I think we often use the two fairly interchangeably, that the power to make us act, the power to cause us to show up, if you like, that motivation and inspiration are very similar. And I think there is, for me, a distinction between the two. I see motivation as often coming more from our kind of personality. And obviously a lot of motivation comes from the outside, people telling us what to think or feel or what we should do and ought to do. So a lot of motivation, I think, is externally sourced, whereas inspiration, I think, is very much internally sourced. So I think our calling is born out of inspiration, and I think inspiration is a high quality fuel, if you like, for our journey. If we are forever trying to make ourselves do things that we don't really want to do, it's tough. That's not sustainable for well, sometimes it is sustainable over a long time, but then people get ill and they burn out and they collapse or whatever, because to try and go against your own soul is a difficult thing to do. Whereas inspiration is going along with your own soul, I believe. So we do have resistance to doing that, but it's not the same as having to motivate ourselves to do something. And, I often kind of like this idea, which is, a lot of idea of leadership is like, well, how do I get people to do things that they'd rather really not be doing? And I kind of, I've always thought, well, what about changing the premise, really? What if leadership were about finding what people naturally wanted to do and were inspired to do and enabling them to do that? Wouldn't that be a much more powerful form of leadership? So that's always a thought that I've had about, the power of following our calling versus motivating ourselves to do things that we don't really want to do. So yes, so the distinction here is, when we're coming from our soul, there is a natural sense of inspiration. We just really want to do this. And sometimes I think we do need to motivate ourselves to do things. I'm often, at times I'm not inspired to broadcast. I'm not inspired. Well, it's hard to get myself to do those things. Sometimes I really do have to kind of nudge myself to do them, but as soon as I'm doing them, I love doing them. So there is a place for motivation. But if we're only operating out of motivation, then I think we can be in trouble. So it's looking for that source of inspiration in us that keeps pulling us forward, as opposed to driving ourselves forward in that completely willful way that motivation often invites us to do. So I hope that's helpful. God bless. Have a good day. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye-bye.